That night, I learned a lesson I would never forget for the rest of my life. Not all wounds are visible, and sometimes, the worst humiliation happens under crystal chandeliers, amidst soft music and the eyes of hundreds of strangers. Thought I was welcome. I was wrong. The taxi had just pulled away when I stepped into the courtyard of Evermont, one of the most luxurious restaurants in Manhattan. The golden plaque engraved with the restaurant's name gleamed under the streetlights. Inside, laughter echoed from tables draped in crisp white linens, and the faint scent of truffle and fine red wine lingered in the air. I clutched my purse tighter, telling myself everything would be fine. At the glossy mahogany reception desk, a middle-aged man stood behind the counter. His gaze skimmed over me, polite, but detached. "Good evening. I have a reservation, Bethany Carter," I said with a smile. He glanced quickly at his computer screen, then shook his head slightly. I'm sorry, ma'am, but I don't see a reservation under that name." I blinked, thrown off. That can't be right. I was invited to dinner with my husband's family. They must have made the reservation. He kept his professional smile, but his tone remained firm. "I just checked. There's a reservation for 6 under Hudson Lancaster. But, I'm afraid..." Before he could finish, a familiar female voice sliced through the conversation. "Oh, Bethany!" Madison, my mother-in-law, appeared from inside, wrapped in a sleek black velvet dress. Her face beamed with the kind of delight only the victor of a cruel game could wear. "You really thought you were invited?" I turned. The restaurant lights caught the perfect platinum sheen of Madison's hair. Behind her, my husband, Ethan Lancaster, 34, stood stiffly, avoiding my gaze. Next to him, his 2 sisters, Hannah and Sophie, dressed in evening gowns, whispered to each other before breaking into soft laughter. I felt my stomach twist, but outwardly I forced myself to stay composed. "I don't understand," I said slowly, trying to keep the hurt out of my voice. "Madison, this is a family dinner, isn't it?" Madison arched an eyebrow, her smirk deepening. "Oh, darling, Ethan and the girls just wanted a night for true family. A place like Evermont might be a little out of your league, don't you think? Maybe a little burger joint in Brooklyn would suit you better." Hannah burst out laughing, hiding her mouth behind a wineglass. Sophie avoided looking directly at me, but I caught the tight-lipped smile at the corner of her mouth. Ethan just sat there, gripping his silverware. I took a deep breath. Curious glances were already drifting toward us from nearby tables. I knew Madison had orchestrated this scene long ago, and I knew, right then, I had only 2 choices: swallow the humiliation and leave quietly, or I tightened my grip on my purse and lifted my chin. My heels tapped lightly against the marble floor as I walked toward the Lancaster table. It felt like every eye in the restaurant was on me, an uninvited guest, an outsider. Madison settled back into her seat, wearing a faint, victorious smile. Ethan glanced at me awkwardly, but said nothing. Hannah and Sophie made no effort to hide their snickering. "What are you doing here, Bethany?" Hannah asked, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. I reached for a chair, intending to sit, but Madison raised a hand to stop me. "Oh, sweetheart, the table's full." "We didn't plan for an extra seat," she said, casually laying her napkin on her lap. I looked around. 6 chairs, 6 people, exactly as Madison had planned. No extra chair, no place for me. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay calm. "I was invited to the family dinner." "Family?" Madison repeated, feigning exaggerated surprise. "You should understand, dear, that family here doesn't exactly include you." Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Ethan, seated right next to Madison, said nothing. I met his eyes, hoping he would stand up, speak out for me, but he only bowed his head, silent, as if I were a stranger he barely knew. Humiliation crept under my skin, burning. I could hear the low murmurs from surrounding tables. People were starting to watch. "You must realize," Sophie chimed in, voice syrupy sweet, "a place like Evermont, isn't exactly for everyone. She winked at Hannah and they both giggled. I clenched the strap of my purse, nails digging into my palm. Bethany, Madison tilted her head, her voice even. We just didn't want you to feel out of place in such a high-end setting. Honestly, we thought you might enjoy something more fitting. There's a lovely little pizza place a few blocks down. She smiled sweetly, as if she had offered some grand kindness. A ripple of laughter burst from Hannah and Sophie. The whole restaurant seemed to thicken with an atmosphere both suffocating and cruel. Ethan still stared down at his glass, knuckles whitening as he gripped it. I felt like I had been stripped bare in the middle of a crowd, the weight of the public humiliation pressing down hard enough to crush. But somehow, I stayed standing. I lifted my head, locking eyes with Madison. I see, I said evenly, my own calm surprising even me. Madison shrugged, as if she were already bored with the spectacle. Ethan said nothing. His silence hurt more than any insult hurled at me tonight. I drew in a deep, steadying breath and thought, this will be the last time they ever get the chance to humiliate me. I tightened my grip on my purse, but this time not out of shame or anger. This time, it was because a plan had just formed in my mind. Sharp, clear, and lethal. If they thought they could back me into a corner without consequence, then tonight, they were about to learn a lesson they would never forget. I turned and faced the maitre d', who was still lingering awkwardly near the entrance. Excuse me, I said, voice smooth and decisive. Could you please ask the owner of the restaurant to come out? Madison let out a brittle laugh, the sound like glass shattering. Oh, Bethany, you really think Mr. Hayes is going to waste his time on someone like you? She glanced at Hannah and Sophie, who giggled on cue. I didn't respond to Madison. Instead, I kept my gaze firmly on the maitre d'. He hesitated, uncertain whether to risk angering a wealthy patron or to honor my request. Fortunately, I didn't have to wait long. A deep, familiar voice called out from the entrance. Bethany? Is that you? It was Mr. Donovan Hayes, owner of Evermont, was walking toward us. He was in his early 50s, tall, with neatly trimmed salt and pepper hair, and a confident, effortless elegance. Madison stiffened in her seat, clearly caught off guard. Ethan and his sisters stared, stunned. I smiled calmly. Hello, Uncle Donovan. It's been a while. Donovan smiled warmly, reaching out to shake my hand. Too long, my talented girl. His eyes scanned the tense scene at the table, immediately sensing the thick, suffocating air. What's going on here? He asked, voice serious. I tilted my head slightly. It seems there's been a little misunderstanding. Apparently my name wasn't included in tonight's reservation. Donovan frowned. He turned toward the maitre d'. How could that happen? Before the maitre d' could stammer out an excuse, Madison cut in, her voice dripping honey. I'm sorry, Mr. Hayes, but Bethany isn't part of tonight's family dinner. It would be inconvenient if... Donovan turned to look at her, his gaze growing noticeably colder. Or inconvenient for whom, ma'am? The entire table fell silent. Only the soft jazz music in the background remained. He turned back to me, smiling warmly. If it's Bethany Carter, then she is no stranger here. She is family at Evermont. Madison froze, her mouth opening as if to say something, but no sound came out. I smiled faintly. Before marrying Ethan, I used to work here. Donovan was the one who trained me in high-end restaurant management. Donovan nodded in confirmation. And she was one of the finest I've ever mentored. I looked straight at Madison. For the first time that evening, she couldn't mask the defeat creeping across her heavily made-up face. Donovan turned to the maitre d'. Arrange a VIP table for Ms. Carter. Don't keep her waiting. The maitre d' bowed quickly. Of course, Mr. Hayes. I gently turned back toward the Lancaster family, my gaze sweeping over their now ashen faces. Looks like I'll still be having a wonderful dinner tonight, I said, my voice light, as if making polite conversation. Madison clenched her teeth, but this time, she couldn't get a word out. And Ethan, as always, stayed silent, only watching as I walked away. I walked slowly behind the maitre d', feeling Madison's burning, furious gaze piercing into my back with every step. As soon as I sat down at my new table, Donovan personally brought me a glass of fine red wine. To make up for the unnecessary inconvenience, he said, winking meaningfully. I chuckled softly, not because of the wine, but because I knew tonight's play had only just begun. I cast a glance back at the Lancaster table. Madison was grinding her teeth, while Hannah and Sophie whispered anxiously to each other, darting nervous glances. Ethan looked like he had swallowed a stone, pale as a ghost. I lifted my wineglass and stood up leisurely. Part of me wanted to just let it go. But the other part, the part that had endured years of humiliation, refused. I walked back, stopping right beside their table. The whole group immediately fell silent. I smiled gently, as if we were just exchanging pleasantries. Perhaps you're wondering why Donovan Hayes himself came out to greet me, I began, my voice soft but steady. Madison gripped her wineglass tightly, her hand trembling. I suppose Madison never mentioned, I continued, letting my gaze skim across her, that before I became part of the Lancaster family, I was operations manager at Evermont for almost 4 years. Sophie's mouth dropped open. Hannah went rigid. I wasn't just bussing tables or serving as you so kindly implied, I said, locking eyes with Madison. I helped Donovan expand the Evermont brand into 3 other cities, Seattle, Boston, and Chicago. Madison inhaled sharply, clearly struggling to contain her growing rage. I manage the human resources team, trained managerial staff, I added, emphasizing every word. And from that work, I saved enough money to build my own capital. Madison's eyes darkened, but she forced a scornful smile. Oh, that savings probably just covered a nice dinner here. I smiled thinly, setting my glass down. No, Madison, that capital allowed me to invest in 3 real estate projects in Austin and Denver, I answered, my voice icy. And later, when Ethan wanted to start his own venture, he used money from me, not from the Graham Lancaster family, to do it. The table froze solid. Madison leaned forward, her voice hissing through clenched teeth. You're lying. I stepped back slightly, calmly looking at her. If you'd like, I can send you a copy of the investment agreements, with Ethan's signature, notarized and everything. Madison opened her mouth as if to argue, but her eyes flicked quickly to Ethan, searching desperately for denial from her son. Ethan, like a shadow, kept his head bowed, silent. Hannah and Sophie turned to look at him, their faces draining of color. At that moment I knew Madison finally understood. It wasn't me depending on Ethan. It was Ethan who had depended on me. I bent down, picking up my wineglass again. So if tonight Mrs. Madison planned to teach me a lesson about knowing my place, I smiled sweetly, then I'm afraid the one who needs to learn isn't me. I raised my glass, taking a slow sip, my eyes never leaving hers. And for the first time in all the years I had been part of the Lancaster family, I saw Madison, the woman who had ruled over everything, start to crack. The air around the Lancaster table was suffocating, as if someone had drained every ounce of oxygen. Madison clenched her fists until her knuckles turned white, her face burning red. And Ethan, the man who once promised to protect me forever, sat frozen, too ashamed to even meet my eyes. I set my wineglass down, slowly tracing the edge of the tablecloth with my fingers, savoring every second of this heavy silence. Maybe you didn't know, I said smoothly. Ethan failed 2 investment attempts before his current company finally succeeded. Hannah flinched slightly. Sophie looked at Ethan as if she had just discovered a terrible secret. I was the one who funded him, I continued, not giving Madison a chance to interrupt. $200,000 0 cents the first time, and another $300 0 cents for the second project. Us let out a harsh, mocking laugh. What nonsense! Ethan never needed your money. Our family has always supported him. I pressed my lips into a cold, thin smile. Oh, really? Then why did Ethan have to sign a personal loan agreement with me instead of using funds from your great Lancaster family? I looked straight at Ethan. And Ethan sat frozen, like a man shackled to his chair, panic flashing in his eyes, his hands trembling under the table. There's an original contract, there's his signature, There's a notarized copy, I added, each word slicing through the thick, suffocating air like a blade. Sophie blurted out, "Ethan, is that true?" Ethan opened his mouth, his voice hoarse. That was a long time ago. An admission he couldn't hide. Madison glared at him, as if for the first time she realized her golden boy wasn't nearly as strong as she once believed. But I wasn't done yet. "And you know what's even more interesting, Madison?" I tilted my head, deliberately letting each word drip like acid. "Ethan's company shares, originally 70%, were under my name." The table went dead silent. Hannah's jaw dropped. Sophie covered her mouth in shock. Madison sat there, stunned, as if someone had kicked the very throne she thought she ruled from. I smirked. "He never repaid me," I continued, my voice steady, like reading a final verdict. "And to this very day, all the success you so proudly brag about regarding your precious heir was built entirely on my money." Madison shot to her feet, slamming her hands on the table. "You're lying!" she practically screamed. I didn't move. "You can check," I replied coldly. "My lawyer's holding copies of all the contracts. If you'd like, I can send them to you tonight." Ethan quickly reached out to pull Madison back into her seat, but he couldn't hide his extreme discomfort. I stood up straight, sweeping my gaze across them, one by one, as if nailing the truth into their hearts. "You wanted to humiliate me in public, Madison?" I asked, my voice low. "What a pity, because tonight, the one who has to bow their head is you." I lifted my wine glass, the crystal lights reflecting a deep crimson glow across its surface. "Congratulations on underestimating the wrong person, Madison." I took a sip of the wine, the bittersweet taste melting on my tongue, while the sweetness of victory flooded through me. And this time, when I turned and walked away, not a single word was spoken behind me. I walked away, leaving behind a table drenched in silence and humiliation. No one followed. No one called out to me. Not even Ethan. And just like that, I had the answer I'd been waiting for all along. I didn't head straight outside. I turned into a quiet corner of the restaurant's hallway, where the soft lighting couldn't reveal the storms still stirring inside me. I pulled out my phone, opening a pre-written text. "Me. Initiate the process. I want the divorce papers sent within 24 hours. Within seconds, my lawyer replied. "Obstant notre dame contraire, borg il de fer, your file will be prioritized." I exhaled slowly. No regret, no hesitation. Only one thing remained. A feeling of liberation. 10 minutes later, Ethan finally showed up, looking lost, his face pale. "Bethany?" he stammered. I turned to him, my gaze calm, as if looking at a stranger. "You're too late, Ethan." He swallowed hard, wringing the hem of his jacket. I didn't know it'd turn out like this." I gave a cold, humorless smile. "You didn't know?" I repeated, tilting my head. "Or you knew but you chose silence, like you always do whenever your mother insults me?" Ethan opened his mouth to explain, but I raised my hand to cut him off. "No need to explain, Ethan. I've heard enough. And I've seen enough." He stepped closer, his voice trembling. "We can sit down and talk, right? Please don't make any rash decisions." I looked at him, strangely detached. "Rash decisions?" I echoed, my voice soft but razor sharp. "You think leaving a man who never stood up for his wife after 5 years of endurance is rash?" Ethan couldn't respond. His eyes darted, clinging to me like a drowning man reaching for driftwood. "You had so many chances to stand by me," I continued, each word hitting like a hammer on the final nail. "But you didn't choose me. Not once." I tightened my grip on my purse, ready to leave. But before turning away, I looked him straight in the eyes one last time. "You know what, Ethan?" I said softly. "Loving someone requires courage. Sadly, that's something you've never had." I turned on my heels, walking straight out, leaving behind a chapter filled with disappointment. Outside, New York City was lighting up. Long streaks of golden light stretched across the rain-slicked streets. I took a deep breath, feeling the chill sink into my lungs. Cold, but clear. Tonight, I lost a man who wasn't worthy. And in return, I found myself again. I hailed a taxi. As soon as the door shut behind me, I sent one last text to my lawyer. Make sure to include all evidence of my investments. I'm not leaving him anything. The message sent within a second. I leaned back into the seat, the city lights sliding across the misty glass window. And for the first time in years, there was no sadness. Only one feeling remained: freedom. 3 days later, Ethan finally mustered the courage to ask for a meeting. A meeting that both he and I knew would be the last. We sat across from each other in a neutral law office, no longer surrounded by lavish dinners or sweet promises. Only the bare truth between two people who once called each other family. Ethan sat hunched over, hands tightly clasped together, his face hollow, as if he hadn't slept in days. I was the complete opposite, composed, clear, cold. I had prepared myself thoroughly for this moment. My lawyer slid the divorce documents toward Ethan. The terms are clear. If there are no questions, we'll proceed with the signing today. Ethan swallowed hard, looking up at me, his eyes a mix of desperation and pleading. Bethany, please, he whispered. We can find another way. I can change, I swear. I shook my head slowly, closing the last door between us. It's too late, Ethan. He lunged forward, placing both hands on the table, eyes begging. I know I was wrong. I know I didn't protect you, didn't speak up when I should have. But please, don't take everything from me. Please, don't destroy it all. I looked at him, feeling no ripple of sympathy. Destroy it? I smirked. Ethan, everything you have was built from what I gave you. I'm only taking back what belongs to me, nothing more. He gripped the edge of the table, veins bulging on the backs of his hands. What do you want? Ethan growled, anger starting to seep in where weakness had been. Money? Status? You want to see me left with nothing? I tilted my head, replying coolly. No, Ethan, I just want my freedom, and you no longer have the right to keep me. Ethan's face flushed red, his gaze frantic. You are everything to me, he blurted out. I smiled, a sad, hollow smile. Really? I asked softly, letting each word cut deep. If I were truly everything, why did you stay silent every time your mother humiliated me? Why did you turn away every time I needed you to stand with me? Ethan opened his mouth but couldn't speak a word. I stood up neatly, without hesitation. Loving someone isn't just about words, Ethan. Love is action. Love is choice. Every day, whether easy or hard, and you... I paused, locking eyes with his tear-filled gaze. You made your choice. It just wasn't me. I picked up the pen and signed the divorce papers with a single, firm stroke. The sound of the pen scratching across the paper was chilling, like the click of a lock closing on the final door between us. I pushed the file toward the lawyer, finished. Without looking back even once, I picked up my bag and walked out of the room. Behind me, Ethan called out one last sentence, his voice breaking. Bethany, if there's another life, I hope I can meet you again. And do it right. I paused for a brief moment. I didn't turn around. Just a faint, bittersweet smile. Too bad, Ethan, I whispered. I don't live for the next life. And then I walked away. Each step was another old chain snapping free. Each breath reclaimed a part of my heart that I had once lost. Freedom. Peace. And this time, no one, not Ethan, not Madison, could ever take it from me again. 3 months after that divorce day, I stood on the rooftop of the building where I now owned a penthouse, overlooking all of New York City, ablaze with lights. The night breeze caressed my hair, but my heart was blazing brighter than ever. I had thought I would crumble after the collapse of my marriage. I had thought the pain would break me. But it didn't. I didn't just survive. I rose, step by step, like an unstoppable flame. The day I signed the divorce papers, I also signed the biggest decision of my life: opening my own company. Carter & Co., a real estate investment and management consulting firm, built from the funds I reclaimed from the money Ethan once borrowed. In just 2 months, I had signed 3 major contracts, each one bringing in profits that far exceeded the money I had ever poured into him. The most miraculous part? For the first time in my life, every achievement had my name on it, not hidden behind anyone else's shadow. No more asking permission to shine. I bought an old penthouse, tore it down, and rebuilt it. Every brick, every pane of glass, every painted wall reflected exactly who I had become: sharp, free, and resilient. New friends came into my life, not because they needed favors, but because they truly respected the skills and strength I brought with me. I made time for myself, taking piano classes on weekends, attending networking events not as someone's plus one, but to expand my own world. And the most beautiful thing? Every morning, waking up in my sunlit apartment, I no longer felt the need to force myself to please anyone. No more Madison's cold stares. No more Ethan's cowardly silence. Only me, and the dreams I had built with my own 2 hands. One Friday afternoon, as I sat on the balcony with a cup of hot espresso in my hand, my phone buzzed. An email. Sender: Ethan Lancaster. Subject: Hope to see you. I sat still, staring at the words, my heart calm like a still autumn lake. Ethan? Still the same Ethan. Still thinking that a single message would make me turn back. Still thinking that I was frozen in place, waiting for him to grow up. I took a sip of coffee and smiled. No, I was no longer that woman. Not because I hated him, but because I had gone too far forward to ever turn back. I pressed delete on the email. No reply. Not even a second of hesitation. I set down my cup, stood up, letting the wind tousle my hair, letting the sunset bathe my skin in warm hues. This life, I had once been pushed down to the very bottom. But from those depths, I built my own throne. And this time, no one, not Ethan, not Madison, not anyone, could ever touch me again. I lifted my head, smiling at the sky. Welcome back, Bethany. Finally, I was truly living, not for anyone else, but for myself. From Bethany's story, I realized that true strength doesn't lie in holding on to those who don't value you, but in having the courage to let go and choose yourself. Sometimes, what we lose is exactly what has been binding us for so long: love, family, or success. Without respect, none are worth sacrificing for. Bethany didn't just walk away from a broken marriage. She reclaimed the right to own her life, and that is the greatest victory. What do you think about Bethany's journey and her decision? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to follow the channel to explore more heartfelt and inspiring family life stories in upcoming episodes.